Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for the best and worst of Alfred Hitchcock Presents Season 1. Once again, for those of you that have been waiting for this video, I would like to apologize for the delay as I am still getting over not feeling the greatest. And I would also like to apologize if my voice comes and goes a little bit, as it is not completely back to 100% at all times yet. With that being said, I would like to get started. I, of course, reviewed every episode of Season 1 of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and now I bring you my 5 favorites and the 5 you should avoid unless you're a completionist and you're just watching every single episode of the series. So, starting with the 5 worst episodes, these first two I actually think are only below average episodes. I don't really think they're bad per se, but they're still not episodes you really need to watch unless you're a completionist. So we start with the Belfry. This was an episode about basically a guy who killed another guy and hides out in a bell tower. This episode has a lot of issues. There's a very stereotypical lead in it, and our main female character makes a lot of poor decisions and seems to do so only so that we have an episode and that the plot goes forward. Just a lot of illogical things happen in this episode by the townspeople as well. The episode also has some kind of odd pacing. It does have a few creepy, well done scenes, but overall it's just not a great episode. It's not very memorable, and it also has some really overdone and obvious symbolism in it, which doesn't help either, and I don't really think the ending is particularly satisfying. So we go to number 4 on my list, Whodunit. This episode kind of has some strange, outdated humor, in my opinion. I often think a lot of the humor holds up on this show, but not so much in this episode. It's also another very oddly paced episode that takes a long time to get going. The beginning seems very padded. The acting is okay, but the whole episode's just kind of a mess. It's kind of unsatisfactory, and I didn't really buy the ending either. I didn't really care for it too much. We go to number 3, Triggers In Leash, which was the show. This was a very early episode in the show's attempt at a Western episode, I guess. It's basically about two gunslingers who want to have a fight, and that's all there really is to it. It's kind of an episode that doesn't really fit into the series. I guess it's technically a suspense episode, but there's really no mystery behind it. It's very repetitive. There's not really enough story in it to last 25 minutes in my opinion, and the ending is very anticlimactic and basically makes the whole episode make no sense. This episode, I guess, is technically not awful. There's just nothing really to it. It's just kind of there. It's just kind of ultimately pointless, which in some ways is the worst thing you can say about an episode. Now, these last 2 episodes I would really suggest avoiding, as I consider them to be really poor. The first, number 2 on my list, is Shopping for Death. This episode actually does try and do something, which why it doesn't rate as the worst episode. At least it tries, but it fails terribly in my opinion. There's very poor illogical plotting in this episode. It's about these 2 guys, and one of them decides he wants to save a woman from doing bad things and being mean to herself, and the whole thing just doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you want to know more, I go more in depth in it on my actual review of the episode. The situations are very contrived. It seems like manufactured danger in a lot of cases, and this whole thing about the heat just doesn't really work in the episode either. And the lead performance of the lead female character is way over the top. And I've always said it's okay to have an unlikable character as long as they're believable, but I just didn't buy into this character. A very unlikable and unbelievable character. And to be fair, the other 2 lead male characters aren't really that likable or believable either. Just a complete mess of an episode. And another episode where the ending doesn't really work and doesn't really resolve anything. It's just kind of a pointless episode, in my opinion. Very badly done and has not dated well at all. But the worst episode by far to me was The Hidden Thing. This is an episode about a guy who witnesses an accident and then tries to recall the license plate number through some weird tactics from another character. This episode's very repetitive and padded. We see flashback scenes of the same thing multiple times. The acting on this show is usually great or at least decent. I thought the acting was kind of all over the place in this episode as well. The episode does set up a decent suspenseful situation, but it has one of those ha ha, we tricked you, nothing happened endings, which I think was supposed to be funny, but it really just feels like kind of a slap in the face to the audience. I really thought it was by far the worst ending of any episode. It was either a ha ha, we fooled you, or they just didn't have a good direction to go in, except as I said in my review, there were many directions they could have went in with the ending of the episode that might have been predictable, but would have at least been more interesting. Overall, The Hidden Thing is a very bad episode of what's normally a very excellent show, and I highly recommend skipping it. Now on to the good stuff. I'll go into what I felt were the 5 best episodes and why. Let me just say this was pretty tough, as there were about 8 episodes I really had on this list, but I wanted to be consistent, so I narrowed it down to 5. And at number 5, I have Back for Christmas. This is an excellent episode. It has a very clever, relatable lead character who isn't really a good guy, but you do feel a little bit of sympathy for his situation. It's always nice to have a complex lead character. And I say he's clever, but he's only clever to a point. As you see in the episode, he does make a mistake. Basically, this episode's about a man who wants to eliminate his wife and has an interesting means of doing it. The episode also has some very solid writing and plotting. It's paced pretty well with a lot of good suspense. And it also has a great twist ending, and it's just overall one of the more memorable episodes, which is why I picked it for the top 5. A series classic, in my opinion. At number 4, I have You Got to Have Luck, which actually could have rated 1 or 2 on this list, except I do believe that you have to suspend some disbelief when you find out the twist of the situation. But if you just go with it, this is an excellent episode about basically a convict who breaks in and terrorizes a woman. The episode's pretty bold for its time, and the guy's actually pretty violent and believable. Like I said, you don't always have to be a likable character, but you have to be a believable character. The acting is very, very good. The pacing is very, very good. The premise is just very unique, and the episode really holds up well. It doesn't feel dated at all, which is one of the best compliments I could pay it. There's excellent suspense, a lot of memorable scenes, and like I said, the twist is really great and really satisfying, if maybe just slightly unbelievable, but it works in the context of the episode, and You Got to Have Luck is a must-see episode, in my opinion. Next on the list at number 3, Help Wanted, another episode that may have made the top 2, except I have the same slight complaint. It's a little bit unbelievable in times, but it's a very unique episode. A man basically needs a job badly and takes a job he may regret taking when he finds out what he's in for. But it's a very unique episode. It kind of mixes a little bit of humor with drama, and it's got a very relatable and likable lead character who gets himself into a bad situation. It has very good acting. This episode flew by. It has a very memorable twist, and in my opinion, it has a very satisfying ending, even if it maybe wraps things up a little bit too neatly. But overall, Help Wanted is an excellent episode. Now I go into the 2 episodes that I really think are all-time great episodes, not only of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but of television in general, especially if you're a fan of old 50s and 60s black and white TV. At number 2 on my list is The Creeper. This is basically just a straight-up murder mystery, but it's executed pretty much flawlessly. I really can't find too much of a flaw in this episode at all. It's basically about a creeper, hence the title, who's terrorizing women all over a city. There's a lot of characters packed into this episode for 25 minutes, and you actually get to know each character a little bit, enough to believe that they could be a legitimate suspect. This is pretty well done for something that clocks in at under a half hour of time. Each character is solid and believable. The lead character is very sympathetic. And let me just say, the twist in the episode makes complete sense in this episode. It's not hard to buy. And it's fit into the episode in a way where it comes across as subtle, but very believable. It doesn't feel like a cheat at all. And I actually didn't see it coming the first time I saw the episode, because I was so engrossed in everything that was going on. So just a pretty much perfectly executed episode, maybe a little stagey here and there, but certainly a great half hour of television, and a perfect example of how great writing, great characters, great pacing, directing, acting, and writing all come together to make an excellent episode. But really for me, number 1 had to be Breakdown. It's a very unique episode that in a lot of ways I think could have failed if it wouldn't have been handled correctly. Fortunately, this episode was directed by Alfred Hitchcock himself, and the guy really once again shows why he's the master of suspense. And he takes a very simple premise, like I said, that could have failed, as this episode feels a little bit experimental kind of, and made it work. It's basically about a businessman, and kind of a businessman that's not very nice, let's put it that way. And he basically has an accident, and the whole episode is about him trying to tell people he's still alive and getting help. Now, Joseph Cotten plays the lead in this episode, and he gives a great performance as all, making us have some sympathy for the character as the episode goes along, which is not easy because he does this all through narration and basically his facial expressions, as that's what this whole episode is the lead character cannot really talk, but he's very well developed, and as his character changes throughout the episode, it doesn't feel forced. It feels like it comes natural and through the situations, instead of being contrived because of the situations. I think this is a big difference. And this episode also has a very great ending. It's not so much a twist ending as it is a character development ending, and it works perfectly in the context of the episode, which is very satisfying. Overall, I would say this episode probably has the strongest theme of season one, and I also think it's the best and most memorable episode of season one, even if it plays a little bit more as a drama. But definitely a unique episode that you should definitely watch. So that's it. Those are my best and worst of season one. If you've seen some or all of the episodes, and would like to leave a comment telling me if you agree or disagree with me, that would be great. And also I'd like to thank everyone who's watched any or all of my Alfred Hitchcock Presents or Twilight Zone reviews. And I do have some new projects coming up on the channel soon. I will have an update video on that in the coming days. So as always, thank you very much for watching.